from some of these new members, they're able to articulate, you know what, I'm joining now because I can see how fast things can change. And I can see that business is able to kind of act quickly to address things that are changing. And I got to do my part.
You're listening to Relish This, the Purpose Marketing Podcast. Here's your host, Stu Swineford.
Hey everybody, Stu here with another great episode of Relish This. Today's guest is Kate Williams, the executive director of one of my favorite organizations, 1% for the Planet. 1% for the Planet lives by the mantra, everyone has a 1%, and helps purpose-focused businesses formalize their giving through a commitment to give 1% of gross revenue to environmental causes. One challenge many organizations and cause-focused businesses face is their reluctance to really get out there and tell these stories they're creating. Kate and I discussed this challenge, how 1% for the Planet knocks virtual events out of the park, and a lot more on today's episode. I had a really great time chatting with Kate, and there's some great takeaways from our conversation. I hope you have as much fun with this as I did. Here we go. Hey, Kate, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well. Thanks for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me.
What is going on out there on the East Coast today?
Well, it's chilly and wintry, and the year is wrapping up, and it's feeling like kind of a great time of year, I have to say, even though it is very dark.
I bet. Yeah, it's still light outside here today, but I'm up in Nederland, Colorado today, and it is one of those great Nederland windy days, and it's definitely sporty out there today.
Oh, nice. That's great. I love Nederland. That's nice to imagine you there.
Yeah, it's a great place. We've been up here for about, almost 27 years now.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, it's great. It gets me out into the forest as quickly as possible, and good community. Love it.
Nice. That's great.
So how's everything going at 1% for the Planet?
You know, it's going really, really well. It's been such a wild year, as I know it has for so many, and you know, it's wild in like many ways. Net is that we have brought on more new members than we have any other year, which we did not expect. So that's really
awesome.
Heartening to see. We have also lost some members, so we definitely are feeling, you know, just the pain, because for most of those members that we've lost, it's because of the economic challenges of this year, which is just so painful. And we want to say to all of them like that we're so grateful for their commitment and welcome them back at any time when things take a turn. But in the meantime, you know, we're grateful for those businesses that have been able to join this year. So our network is bigger than ever. We're about 50-50 US international now. So our brand has evolved, and we're certifying more giving than ever. So we're really driving a lot of positive impact, which is what it's all about. So that's been really great in a hard year to know that we're still able to sort of as a network be a force for good.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I think came on as a partner in either 2015 or 2016. I can't remember which. And it's just amazing to see the growth and also just the brand awareness that you guys have been able to achieve over the last few years, where when we first came on, people were like, 1% for the Planet, what's that? And now there's just so much more brand awareness. It's been really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I agree. And great. It's so great to hear that. And it has been very exciting. And, you know, for me, some of the things that stand out in my head is the number of new members we brought on this year, which is about 1,700 and counting, honestly, is more than the total size of our network when I started just over 5 years ago. So that's pretty awesome. I guess it's about 6 years ago now. So that's really cool. And then in terms of the brand awareness, I also, like when I first started, I would often find myself figuring out how to explain what 1% for the Planet is. And now I feel like there is almost in all cases, oh yeah, I've heard of that. So I'm more like creating a more refined understanding of something that people are already aware of, which is amazing. And I credit our staff team for sure, but also our network, because it's our members who are helping to really convey the power of what 1% for the planet is. So I feel like the tipping point has been that, we've sort of accessed that like global network effect, which is really powerful and exciting.
Yeah, it's great to see. I think that there's a movement kind of in business in general to kind of take a look at what you're doing and what you're able to do as a business. And more and more people are getting a good understanding of what B Corps are and what corporate social responsibility is and cause marketing and all of these things that that are really aligned with what you're trying to accomplish there at 1% for the planet. And so I think all that stuff is it's just creating this snowball effect where people are really getting on board.
Absolutely. And I would say also like the consumer role has also changed. So what people want to do with their dollars is changing, which is amazing, because I think more and more people are realizing, like, what, every purchase I make is essentially a vote. And
Yeah.
so I want to make sure that those dollars are going to things that I believe in. And that's a super powerful force. And there's a lot of data to support that. And so that also, we're riding that wave and hopefully contributing to it as well. But that's certainly been a powerful aspect of growth across our network, is that it's just, a really positive business decision to do the right thing.
Yeah, it's really cool to see kind of this thrust coming from a whole bunch of different directions at once.
Yeah.
And you have this consumer desire to be engaged with brands that are doing good in the world, and you have this brand desire to do the same thing, whether that be from the position of, oh, Jesus is maybe going to be better for us from a brand standpoint, but also better for the planet. And there's just all of this action around it. It's really fun to see.
It is really fun to see. And what's interesting this year, given the crazy year that it has been and the very hard year for many people, is one of the things that we've heard from new members joining, so companies that are joining for the first time, and that's often where I would imagine we'd hear some similar messages from some of our existing members, but from some of these new members, they're able to articulate, what, I'm joining now because I can see how fast things can change. And I can see that business is able to kind of act quickly to address things that are changing. And I got to do my part. And that's been really interesting, because we had no idea what to expect when all this first went down, and, weren't sure that there would be businesses that would be, seeing this priority to join 1% for the planet. But it's, as I said earlier, like, it's really grown. So I think there's that sense of like, woof, things can happen, big things can happen fast globally. So now's the time to act. And then also this sense that it's all connected, so the pandemic, public health, all these global connections, the environment is part of that. The planet is part of that. And so, I think just seeing the rate of change and the connectedness of things has been a powerful lesson of this year. That's all played into all of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like to talk about all of these ecosystems within ecosystems within ecosystems that we live in.
Yeah.
And you have this planetary ecosystem, but then there's this business ecosystem that's part of that. And I was talking with one of my other guests, and he likened it to a water balloon. And when you push hard on a water balloon, something has to give somewhere else. And if you try and take out of that water balloon, the whole thing collapses. And it's all part of this kind of global, this global ecosystem that we live in. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think again, while there has been a lot of suffering associated with this year, so I don't in any way celebrate that, but I do think, as with any challenge, that we have an opportunity to learn, and I think that that high degree of greater awareness of the connectedness of all things is something we can choose to take away from this.
Yeah, for sure. And I just realized I know what 1% for the planet is, but maybe our listeners don't. So I didn't give you the opportunity to chime in and tell us all about it and get people on board.
Yeah, well, that's okay. We just dove right in.
Yeah, we did.
So this great network that we've been talking about, called 1% for the Planet, is essentially based on a pretty simple model that has lots of great complexity associated with it, as all ecosystems do. But basically, we have members, primarily businesses, although we have added individuals as well. So that's a growing opportunity. But our members join by committing to give 1%. In the case of businesses, it's 1% of their annual sales. And then individuals commit their 1% as well. And those members give that 1% to environmental nonprofits. And we also vet and bring on those nonprofit partners. So we make it easier for members to develop giving strategies, identify who to give to, make those important connections. And then the giving happens directly. So our members give directly to the environmental nonprofits that they identify with our support. And we certify that giving annually. So if you see a product or a website with the 1% for the Planet logo, it means that we have certified that they're giving at that 1% of sales level annually. I'm talking about the businesses here. And we currently have more than 4,000 members. We're about 50-50 US international in terms of our membership, which is an exciting trend. We were started in the US, so a lot of our growth initially was in the US, but we really have expanded globally in recent years. And this year, we're certifying the giving that happened in the prior year. So this year, we've certified about $29 million in giving to date, wow. And we're still going. There's still certification happening. So it's we're driving, we being our network of members is driving really powerful change. And that's a lot of giving going to nonprofits this year when, things are, it's been a challenging year. So we're really, really grateful to our members for that annual commitment driving positive change year in and year out.
Yeah, it's just great stuff. The other thing that I love about the organization is it's not just about monetary donations. You also allow at least a portion of one's 1% commitment to come from volunteer hours.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks for bringing that up. So, we believe, and we've, ground truth this with our nonprofits, that supporting nonprofits can happen in different ways. The financial piece is definitely important. I don't know of a nonprofit that doesn't need financial support. So the majority of the 1% does still have to be in the form of financial, but, volunteer in-kind donations. So in-kind being like donations of products or support in other ways can be super valuable for nonprofits who oftentimes are, not able to pay for the contract services or, other kinds of support they may need. And it can be great for the companies too, to, have volunteer opportunities for employees to plant trees or otherwise support a nonprofit. So it's a, really nice, like virtuous circle when we're able to have those other non-monetary forms of donation that can make the membership engagement and partnership just that much richer and more valuable.
Yeah, I think it just reinforces that commitment and gets people on board and gets people, out there and doing things for these organizations, which I think it just fuels itself. It's like this kind of self-feeding fire. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, it's great. And, we love hearing from both members and nonprofits about how they're developing the relationships through the giving, through the volunteering, through the, ways they're figuring out how to share the stories together. It's, I think what's pretty unique about 1% for the Planet is, that it's not just like a foundation giving out money. It's a relationship builder. And there's definitely, real money that's being given. So it's, that is certainly there, but the relationships that are built as part of that have some real lasting value as well.
Yeah, it's great stuff. So speaking of nonprofit partners, what can the people who are listening today, since this is a podcast kind of geared toward nonprofits, what should they know about the program and what do they need to do to become kind of part of that, of your ecosystem?
Yeah. So the way we set up our nonprofit network is that, we really want as many nonprofits as possible who are approved in our network to receive funding each year. Because we're not making the choices about where that money goes, we're supporting our members in developing their giving strategy. The way we bring new nonprofits in is either through a recommendation from a member, and then we put the nonprofit that's recommended through our diligence process, or a recommendation from staff, which usually arises when we're either identifying an area where we feel like we need more representation from nonprofits. So, for example, this year, we made a big push driven by our staff to bring in more environmental justice nonprofits because we realized that was an area where we had made some progress, but we needed to make a lot more progress. So we went out and sort of did research and found nonprofits and are continuing to work to bring those in. So it is a recommendation model. So there's not like, you won't find an application on our website, which I recognize can sometimes be frustrating for nonprofits because I understand the desire to be involved, but it's worked well for us because then it is a way that really strong nonprofits get recommended to us, and nonprofits that we may never have heard of get recommended, and we're able to bring them into the network. If you're listening and you're like, I just really want them to know about me, it's totally fine to reach out. And then we can sort of get you on our radar. And then, as we're doing future research or whatever, we may have the opportunity to bring you on board. So feel free to, reach out to me on LinkedIn or something like that if you'd like to.
Cool. What are the qualifications that are needed what are the things that you're vetting for, just so that people have an understanding of whether they would fit in?
Yeah. So, it is an environmental focus. So we do have some guidelines in each of our issue areas. So our issue areas are climate, food, land, water, wildlife, and pollution, 6 issue areas. And environmental justice really cuts across all those issue areas. And so in each of those issue areas, we have some different guidelines that we've developed that are tied to the Sustainable Development Goals. In the case of the climate area, we have, some ties to the Project Drawdown goals. So, we have guidelines in each of those areas. So we kind of hold up the mission and work of the nonprofit against those. And then we also look at, just some of the basic aspects of, is it a registered 501c3 in good standing? And then if we're going to be making a recommendation, we really will dig a little further. So it's overall a knowledge-based process. So once a nonprofit, makes it through that initial screening, we really seek to understand as much as possible about how are you driving impact? How are you telling your story? What are you measuring? Because those are the kinds of things that we're going to want to understand really well in order to match you effectively with our members.
Right. Oh, that's cool. I love it. So what's the major thrust? Is it, kind of parallel process, trying to bring more nonprofits on board, trying to onboard new members? What are the things that you guys are looking to achieve here in the next couple of years?
Yeah, great question. We have about more than 3,000 nonprofits in our network right now, which is a lot. And I know isn't, certainly not all of them. So, we're really, in terms of evolving our nonprofit work, I think what we're focused on there more than increased numbers per se is, really sort of honing the process from start to finish of how we gather information, how we do that diligence so that we're, just in a better and better position to be able to best represent those nonprofits and put them forward to the partners that would be the best fit. Which isn't to say we're not interested in new nonprofits, but it's the sort of quality of our knowledge and of our practice that is our focus right now. Again, continuing to grow the network as we, need to build out into different areas to best serve both the issues at hand and the members and what they're looking for. So in the nonprofit area, that's kind of what we're focused on. In terms of overall, I mean, we are a nonprofit in which growth is how we drive more impact. So more members drive more giving, drives more giving going to nonprofits, drives more impact. So we really do focus on growing that member network, which does, I will say back to the nonprofits, that as we grow our member network, we invariably get more recommendations for nonprofits,
Right.
and we have new areas that we moved into. So there is some tie for sure between the two. But really, that is a big focus, and we've certainly seen ourselves grow and driven that growth over the last couple of years. And we really are honing our ability to continue to do that, to continue to manage that well, to continue to provide really good support to all those members, just because that's so important, and to continue to build connections across the network. We haven't really talked about that yet. I've mentioned the really important partnership between the members and their giving partners, the nonprofits, but we've also seen incredible value in the partnerships between members in our network and the relationships just, across all the different stakeholders in our network that drive so much learning and kind of evolution of practice in terms of sustainability in, beyond philanthropy that we don't measure. Like, that's not an official part of our model. We're not certifying that, but we've really seen how that's a valuable part of what 1% for the Planet provides. It's like this, engine in which, so much happens, beyond just the certification, which is not insignificant. So there's the certified giving, at close to 29 million plus this year. So, big dollars there. But at the same time, we have members who are learning from each other how to eliminate plastic from their packaging, or getting inspired to, figure out some of the next steps on their sustainability journey. And we have nonprofits that are, learning from both their member donors, but also some of the other nonprofits in their network, other ideas about best practices. So, a whole lot of learning going on beyond what we're officially certifying and tracking, and really continuing to support that is a goal that we have.
Yeah, I know you guys have a network, kind of a marketplace where people can get connected with other 1% players for sure, which is really cool. It goes back to what you were saying earlier about kind of voting with your dollar. I mean, I know that's one of the things that I try to look for and keep on my radar. I don't always do the best job of it, but certainly one of the first things I try to think of is there a 1% for the Planet partner that I can get this from, as opposed to just going to the standard sources. So you're providing a really cool service there as well.
Yeah, and I love that. I appreciate that you said that, because we do have a lot of members who, really do make an effort to purchase from other members. And we always encourage that, because again, it's like, it's going to drive more giving. It's going to drive more impact. So, and then it just develops those really great relationships. So we have seen a lot of that, and, just figuring out how best we can support that and provide the information about that, is something we're continually working on.
Yeah, I'd say that's something that I need to keep it in the more forefront of my mind when I'm making purchases. I do know when I climbed Rainier a couple of years ago, I definitely went to Osprey, who's a 1% for the Planet partner, to get my pack for that particular trip. So it's certainly something that I would encourage people to do. And I know that on your site you have kind of this members area, so people can always do research into, if they're making a big purchase, they can go and try and find a 1% partner to buy from.
Definitely. And one of the really great things now is that while we often think of it as products, and sadly Osprey is not yet a member, but I appreciate that you've named them as such, because that hopefully will make it so. But nonetheless, it's a great example of we often think of 1% in terms of products, but we now have in our network not only products for taking outdoors. We have food, we have tea, we have banks. You can do your banking differently. We have life insurance. We have marketing firms. So you can have your branding and marketing and website. You really could, feed, clothe, house, because we have construction companies, manage your finances, run your business in various ways, all with 1% for the Planet members, which is really, really fabulous.
Yeah, it is really cool. And I just remembered how Osprey popped into my head. They're a Colorado for Outdoor Business Alliance partner, and that's where I got them in the front of my mind. So
Yeah, no,
it was a little tangential, but
no problem. And like no shade whatsoever on Osprey. I love their stuff and also have a pack of theirs. And I just wanted to be clear, they're not yet a member.
well, let's get them on board. How about that?
Definitely.
So as you're trying to get new members, what's your main kind of strategy there? What are you guys employing to bring more people on board?
Yeah, so it's a great question because right now the significant majority of our growth has been organic, meaning it's inquiries coming to us driven by those companies. So for most of this year, we've had about 100 of those queries come in each week. So those are people reaching out to us because they got a recommendation from a peer, they saw us in an article, they saw us on a product, all sorts of different ways. But those are inquiries that came to us. So then we follow up on those and, ideally bring those people on board. And that's really exciting. So that there's that side of things. And so we definitely work to create more and more ways in which, we can inspire that kind of direct outreach from potential members. And then we also have a more sort of proactive strategy of identifying, members, industries, or I shouldn't say members, like potential members, industries that are a good fit where we, either where we don't have a lot of other members, so there's like a leadership opportunity, or where we do have a strong membership, so there's kind of critical mass. And then we pursue that. We are planning to hire some new capacity for that more proactive outreach, because that's, given the amount of inbound interest that we've had, it's been actually quite hard for us to get to that proactive outreach. So we're really excited to be able to move more in that direction, even as we're really thrilled that our quote problem is that we're swamped with
Right.
interest.
Yeah, it's like one of those good problems to have sort of thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, I know that, well, the early part of 2020, and this episode it will air in March of next year.
Okay.
But in the early part of 2020, I know that we were, looking forward to a couple of big events, and I'm on the steering committee here on the Front Range for 1%, and we were going to put together a community event to try and bring more businesses in and learn about 1% for the planet. And then you have your global event, which was going to be held in Culver City, I think, last year or this year
in Hollywood.
And it was, it had to be canceled. But those are great opportunities for members to come together and really get to meet and know one another. So I know that in-person stuff was a big pillar, prior to the pandemic. And I'm sure that we'll get back to that here as soon as we can roll out the vaccine and get back to kind of that normalcy. Did you do any kind of pivoting in this year in terms of bringing things to a more virtual audience?
Yeah, such a great question. And, I think we and many, many, many others did lots of pivoting this year. This is the year of the pivot. And I actually, like when you mentioned this airing in March, which is 3 months out, and like back in ancient times before the pandemic, that was like, yeah, that's not that far off. And now I'm like, 3 months, like who knows what can happen in 3 months. So, yes, this is the year of the pivot and of getting very good at like expecting that we're going to adapt in less than 3 months time. But so we had planned not only our global summit, but also a series of global events, a kind of global tour. And both of those shifted. So the global summit, we actually canceled. We didn't try and replace it immediately with a virtual event. And at this point, we've bumped it out to 2022, just because the summit, for anyone who's listening and for any of our members, or just, for anyone, it's a really amazing in-person event. And it, a lot of the content and, I'll talk about what we're going to be doing virtually in the meantime. But we're big believers in the power of that like in-person gathering, because it's just like energy like you wouldn't believe. So we're really excited to get back to that when the time can happen again. And we're thinking 2022 is probably, knock on wood, when we can start planning that way. So what we did this year is we did just like take that off the calendar, and that was a hard decision, and we were all a little depressed for a while, but we moved on, and then we shifted our global tour to being a virtual campaign focused really on sharing the impact stories, the stories of what happens when our members make their donations and provide that in-kind support to nonprofits. So really just the so what of our model. So that was all really powerful. And then what we've put in place heading into 2021 and what will be fully underway starting in Q1 is a series of virtual events of all different types. Some of them more of the kind of mini summit type with some keynotes and things like that. Others more practical webinars. So we'll have like a whole variety of virtual events and learning sessions happening across all of 2021. And then 2022 is our 20th anniversary. So we'll have, again, hopefully, knock on wood, our global summit in person. And then, ideally continue to have parallel sort of virtual events and in-person events. And one thing also is like starting in 2021, as soon as we can get back to doing some smaller regional events. So, in the Front Range, if, when hopefully by the fall, that would be something that we could start doing again. So, we'll be sort of at the ready to, step into some of the smaller events that don't require quite as much planning as the Global Summit, ideally earlier than 2022.
Yeah, I know that we were planning that event, and it was part of that tour that you were putting on. That we were going to do on the Front Range.
Yeah.
And we were really looking forward to that. I think so. Being a not the longest term member that you've ever had, but certainly we've been around for a little while. I remember the first global summit that you had was in Boulder, right?
Yes, it was our first 2 years of the global summit were in Boulder. Yeah, and I think that's where we first met. Yes,
it was, and those were so great because it was when there weren't as many people there, and so it was kind of fun because it was intimate, but with some really good material. And then the last one that we were able to attend was out in Portland, and it was a lot bigger. It was probably at least twice the size, if not triple the size. And it was just also amazing in that all of the great speakers that you got, and just that opportunity to kind of rub shoulders with so many like-minded people. And the other piece of these events that you were able to engage action at these events as well. And I know that Brett and I did a cleanup there in one of the parks in Portland as part of our kind of giving back commitment as part of the event. And it was just really, really fun to kind of not only bring people together to meet, but also to get them to take some action.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. Yeah, and I mean, that's just another example of how like you can't really replace that in a virtual event. And we're going to, definitely have a great sort of virtual series, but those kinds of like action engagements and just the power of the connections that are built when, we're sort of learning together. We're super excited about that. So eager to, get back to those in-person opportunities, including the Global Summit, but also, we're all about like seeing the opportunity in whatever challenges have come our way this year. And I think learning as an increasingly global dispersed network, our ability to have powerful and effective virtual events, is something that, I think will continue parallel to, getting back to in-person events.
Well, there's certainly an environmental, positive environmental effect of not having everyone have to fly somewhere. And, one of the things that is interesting is just the decrease in miles that my business partner Brett and I have driven this year is certainly I would say a win. What when you're putting on, so I'm sure you've learned a lot over the course of this last year in terms of these virtual events. What are some of the things that you've seen work really well, that other nonprofit partners might be able to kind of take advantage of?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I'm sure we'll, continue to learn more next year because we'll be embarking on a lot of, direct events next year. But some of the things that we have learned, one is, really good preparation, sort of like anything that you do. Just, having, if you're going to do a panel, really, actively prepping all the participants beforehand so that by the time you get to the live panel, it's very much live. But, unlike in an in-person event where there can be kind of that relationship with the audience, where if there's an awkward pause or sort of a question that needs to be repeated or something like that, that can kind of flow more naturally. I think when you're in a virtual setting, just, a little more sort of prep and polish makes that live engagement that much more valuable. Stating the obvious, like dialing in the tech is important, because while we're all much more patient with technical issues, because we've probably experienced them all of us at some point during the year, there's also, just the opportunity to get those right. And then I think less is more. People are spending so much time online that creating ways for concise information to be shared, and then like maximum time for engagement using different mechanisms. A really cool feature that I'm sure a lot of people are seeing and taking advantage of is that like real-time opportunity to have a speaker or a panel underway and a very active chat thread going, so that you can have some interplay real time. So really just like not trying to make a virtual event exactly the same as a live event, and instead like acknowledging this is going to be different. So let's do it differently in the ways that makes it better. And let's use the tools that we wouldn't have in the same way that if we were live. So those are, I'm sure there are a lot of other people listening who have even more and better tips than that. But those are some of the basics that I think are pretty important.
Yeah, those are great. There were two others that I've seen work really well. And one is the idea of really making sure that you don't go it alone during an event like this, and have someone on staff,
yes,
like curating the chat, so that you're not trying to run a panel and figure out how to keep track of all the questions and do all of these things at once, but really kind of engaging your team to be part of that. To make it run smoothly. And then breakout rooms have been a really cool thing that we've seen work well, where when you have a panel, maybe, kind of taking that panel and breaking it back out and letting people kind of choose which room they go into, or split the audience and allow people kind of one-on-ones with certain panel members, has been a really cool way to kind of create that more intimacy within this great big virtual conference, or whatever you want to call it, that you're having.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point, because I do think that creates a way for some of those connections that we're all really hungry for to happen in a really positive way. So yeah, I think that's an excellent point.
I just love the idea of being able to bring so many people into a community, and even have kind of a bigger event than you might have otherwise, because you're able to kind of engage a global audience, and maybe people who wouldn't have been able to make it in person can all of a sudden participate and be part of that experience.
I definitely agree. And sort of back to your earlier point about travel, I mean, I do think that's something that we've all had the opportunity to learn, and that I think, I really hope we all beyond just 1% hold on to, is that we've learned that there are things that we used to think we had to travel for, that we've learned that we can handle quite effectively virtually. And so we can save travel and time, and we can, include, a greater diversity of people in some ways that we may not have thought we could before, when we sort of had like our mind set on like, this is something we do in person. And So I do think there's a lot of opportunity that's good for the planet and good for sort of broader inclusion that we can carry forward by having, this understanding of what is quite possible to be really effective and engaging virtually. And then again, like, also acknowledge that, there are certain times when, like, there's nothing like being in the same room or same physical space with people and connecting with them in that way. And so really, celebrating those opportunities when they arise and using them well for what they offer.
Yeah, for sure. I am going to give out so many hugs as soon as this thing is over. I've certainly missed that.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what are some of the really unique or interesting stories that you've heard either from nonprofits who are part of the program or even business members that they've come out and just said how great being part of 1% has been for them?
Oh my goodness, that is such a good question, because I feel like 1% for the planet is such a hope factory. No matter what is going on, I feel like I can always immediately sort of pull up a member or a nonprofit who is just like such an inspiration. So in terms of, really concrete stories, we had a cool moment this year where one of our longstanding members, Coda Lee, they're a French beauty product, skin product company, and they've really focused on tree planting because that ties to some of where they do their sourcing and things like that. And they just did a great little Instagram on, talking about I don't remember exactly how many million, but the next million trees that they've planted thanks to the giving, and really sort of connecting consumers into how, their purchases enabled them to plant all these trees, which makes a huge difference because literally it is like several millions of trees. So, it's a big number, and it's the result of, really significant 1% giving that they've done thanks to their consumers. So that's one example. We have, the list goes on of, nonprofits who have been able to either, address some plastics issues in a big way or sort of build out their programs on the ground. And really in this year, it's been like heartening to see how where in many cases it's felt like so many things have had to stall this year just because of what's going on. The giving that our network has done has really helped important efforts to stay afoot. And in the case of, the lead up to the election, there's a lot of support going to some of our nonprofits who were, doing a lot of work to, get out the vote or, make sure that there was, access to information about voting. And that was really exciting to see that as well.
Yeah, it's great to just see people get on board and really get excited about how they can help move the needle in terms of environmental stewardship.
Yeah.
One of the things I think is interesting, and I know that as a member, Relish hasn't done as great a job now that I'm thinking of it as we probably could, but it's that storytelling component, just really leveraging the opportunity that both nonprofit and for-profit members or partners and members have in this idea that you've given yourself this opportunity to tell this story.
Yeah.
And to leverage the good that you're doing for the planet and for these nonprofit partners to get that message out there and be authentic and be very explicit about the good things that are coming out of this membership and the partnerships that are created here. And I know that you have some I was going to say regulations, but kind of rules around being a partner and being a member, in that you want to help people tell that story and and leverage the impact of that 1% for the planet, brand that you can put on your business. And I'm not being very eloquent here in what I'm trying to say, but essentially, I think that there's a huge opportunity for business partners, so your members and the nonprofit partners that they are giving to kind of share the opportunity to tell that story of how this organization is helping both of those entities grow and thrive.
Yeah. Well, I think you're being very eloquent. I think that's like a really, really great point. And, it's interesting because it's actually harder sometimes than people think to figure out how to tell that story, or to just prioritize telling that story. In some cases, the members or the donors feel like, well, I don't want to like brag and like make a big deal about it. Or, on the nonprofit side, they're just busy doing the work. But what we've seen time and again, and what we hear time and again, is how much the most important thing about the 1% for the Planet brand is those stories of impact, because that's the so what. That's why it all matters, is that real things are happening on the ground that are affecting and improving real places, and being meaningful to real people, and just driving really positive impact. And it's so powerful. And I was saying earlier that there is the opportunity to vote with your dollars, and it's so much easier to make the choice to vote with your dollars if you're like, oh yeah, like this does drive change. And like, I have an emotional sense of the kind of change that it can drive because I saw these great stories about sort of this giving that happened. So, our staff, is working. We try to just really figure out how can we best support members to make it, and nonprofits, to make it as easy as possible to tell those stories, to create opportunities to share those stories and things like that. So, we do want, all of our nonprofits and members to feel like they can always, come to us as a resource for that storytelling.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking that there might be opportunities to put together kind of storytelling 101 for both the members and the nonprofits, and be able to help facilitate the creation of that messaging for 1%, internally. And either that can be a very scalable items, such as just kind of some guidelines in terms of how to get that messaging out there and how to really tell that story. Or even, obviously this requires some bandwidth on your end, but maybe taking some examples and doing one-on-one kind of workshopping, or those storytelling opportunities to get those out there. And then you can use those internally as well, to help reinforce, when you're going out and talking to prospective new members, to really reinforce, these become kind of case studies that you can use to increase that membership opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. And I, back to some of like the event stuff that we were talking about, one of the features of our global summits, at least a couple of years, if not all of the years, is to have that sort of workshop element on like effective storytelling. So we have done a couple panels on that, like storytelling piece, because you're absolutely right. There's a real opportunity for members and nonprofits to kind of develop that understanding and framework for that opportunity, because particularly as our network grows, like the 1% for the Planet channels, we don't actually can't tell every story that's happening across our network.
Right.
Literally, because we don't have that many hours in the day or like slots in our like social media, which isn't for lack of loving every single one of those stories, but the network truly has to like operate as a network, in that like the stories need to radiate out across the network. And so, one of the things that we have done, like in our Be 1% Better campaign, is equip members with, excuse me, with members and nonprofits with sort of assets and tools and frameworks for telling those stories of impact, and then like communicating them out using some sort of shared hashtags and things like that, so we can share that story, that big story together, without having 1% for the planet, be a bottleneck in any way.
Right.
And so that's a really powerful opportunity. And we've seen some great results with that through this Be 1% Better campaign that I mentioned, as well as some other things that we've done.
Yeah, it's just, I think that's amazing. And definitely I would encourage everyone to take advantage of those opportunities. And I'm going to take that advice myself, because I know that I maybe haven't done as great of a job as I could with that opportunity or with those opportunities. I'm wondering if some of the stuff that you were just describing, that I'm trying to go back and remember when those showed up during the global summits, but I know that you record the main stage stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the breakout room activities that I can recall, I don't remember those necessarily being recorded, but just going back to that vault of recorded materials and seeing if there are ways to repurpose some of that for, as part of like a membership toolkit or things of that nature, just make those available so that people can learn from these events. Maybe they weren't a 1% for the planet partner at the time.
Yeah.
That might be some ways to kind of repurpose some of those items that you have already. Yeah,
definitely. And then also, I think just, kind of using our virtual stage moving forward for continued, shared learning about effective storytelling is certainly an opportunity as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have such a huge, diverse talent pool to draw from all of the members and partners. It's cool to see that kind of brain power come together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's having this incredible network is powerful and overwhelming in the best sense of the word, because there is so much knowledge embedded across the network. So figuring out, the ways to best like access and share that across the network is an opportunity, and, sometimes the best kind of challenge.
Yeah, for sure. So moving into, so this will come out in March-ish. Mm-hmm. So what are the things that people should be looking out for in that kind of Q2 of 2021 from 1%?
Yeah. So few things. One is, we will have some virtual events on the board. So those would be, there to look for and participate in. Don't have that schedule right now, but it's coming together. We will, potentially be starting to plan some events, in-person events, to be determined. We will most likely have some sort of a campaign, as we have in the past. I mentioned that Be 1% Better. It probably will be like blended across the year, but that creates some storytelling opportunities. We are going to be launching a 1% for the Planet donor advised fund, which is like our big new launch for next year. Starting next year, certainly to carry forward. And, the goal for that is just to continue to increase our impact. And the way that would function is it would enable us to access donations from members, but also non-members. And then those donations would drive both further giving to nonprofits as well as drive impact investing. And so that would be a sort of new way in which 1% for the Planet could play a role in driving impact. So we're pretty excited about that, because it's the first kind of new offering, which would sit side by side membership. Current membership wouldn't change at all, and existing members wouldn't have to participate in that, but they certainly could. But it would just create a new pathway for engagement for a whole new set of donors. So we're pretty excited about that. So that will be the big new offering that will launch probably sometime toward the end of Q2.
That sounds really amazing. I'm excited to hear more about that.
Yeah, we're definitely excited about that. And then, our staff is going to be growing. And, as is sort of the beauty of the 1% for the Planet network, so much of the power that happens is, in the hands of individual members, working with either, their region. So, Stu, you mentioned the Front Range Steering Committee, who knows what you guys will cook up. And so there, I imagine there will be, as the world kind of starts to open back up again, knock on wood, there will be more opportunities for, those regional steering committees and places where there are members coming together, for amazing ideas to take shape and happen.
Yeah, I know we have a really good crew here in the Denver Boulder area, with some really smart people on it, with equally cool businesses. So it's fun to be part of that group. And I would encourage anyone who has the opportunity to be on a steering committee to reach out to their 1% kind of guide who helps that region figure things out and try and come up with some good ideas to bring other people together and on board.
Yeah, definitely. And if you are like, oh, I didn't know there was such a thing as steering committees, if you're a member listening to this, just, it's a great thing for you to talk to your account manager about, just to learn like what might be available to you in your area.
Yeah, for sure. Account manager was the word I was looking for that wasn't coming to my brain.
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. How can people find out more about 1% for the Planet?
Yeah, so a couple different pathways. One is our website, which is a great place to go. So that's 1%fortheplanet.org, and it's all spelled out in letters. So, 1%fortheplanet.org. And then we do have, pretty active social channels. So I'll just point you to Instagram and you could probably navigate from there. But that's the number 1% FTP. And that's a good one. And that's a pretty active channel for us.
Nice. And I'm all about action. And as I know, are you. And so if people who listen to this show today were to do one thing after listening to the show, any type of action, what would you want people to do?
I would say, think about and then act on the fact that everyone has a 1%. And our members are bringing that to life in terms of 1% of sales. But if you break it down to every day, like think about your time, think about your money, think about what you might spend on a given day. Like what would it look like if you took 1% of that time or money or effort, however you want to measure it, and directed that toward something that would make a difference? It's a really powerful exercise, and you can stop at the level of the thought exercise, but what if you brought it to life? So, if 1% of your time started going to, you tallied it up and then you decided that you were going to volunteer that at some point, that would be pretty powerful. 1% of what you would spend in a given day, which I know has gotten sort of funky since many of us are working from home. So that like stop at the coffee shop is no longer as concrete, but like 1% of your grocery bill for a week or something like that. What if you were to sort of tally that and set that aside and say, I'm going to give that to a food-focused nonprofit that's doing great work in sustainable ag? Like that's right there for you. And probably you'd begin to see like, actually, like here I thought I couldn't do a lot, but I can actually do something that ties to my everyday. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And I am notorious for providing really bad math on the show, but I think my calculations were that that's basically 15 minutes that you're awake. So if you're awake for 16 hours in a day, it's roughly 15 minutes that represents 1% of that time. And so I think that's right.
I'm doing the math right now.
It's 6 minutes. It's like 4 to 6 minutes an hour, right?
Right.
So maybe my math's off a little bit. But anyway, it's not that much.
It's not very much time. It's about 10 minutes. Although my math was like I was multitasking in terms of talking to you. But it's very little time. And so if you think about like, all right, so, what would that mean if I just like wrote that down, like in the corner of my to-do list, and then, or just, did the math. Okay, if it's 10 minutes a day, if I multiply that by 365, that's time that I could volunteer. And what would that look like? And what we have found when we've kind of talked about this and, asked members, individual members, companies, who are involved. It's really powerful in a couple of different ways. One is that it puts action within reach, because it's very easy to feel overwhelmed by climate change, and kind of, well, what can I do? But breaking it down, it's like, well, I can actually do my 1%. I can do my part. So it sort of breaks it down and makes it actionable. But it also then, sometimes you can also feel like, well, I'm not doing enough. It can also help you to feel like, I'm doing 1%. And if Stu is also doing 1% and Kate is also doing 1%, and it all adds up, then you realize, oh, I'm part of driving that $30 million in change that Kate was mentioning. And so, the power of like owning and feeling really good about your 1%, but also knowing that it adds up with other people's 1%. So you're part of a collective act, whether or not you're a member. Of course, we want you to be a member, because that's a great way to go. But whether or not you're a member, if you sort of have the knowledge that you're part of this larger movement of people who are committing their 1%, that's a big deal. And you realize like a little multiplied by a lot equals a lot. And that's what you get to be part of.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show, Kate. It's lovely to talk to you all the time. I miss seeing you in person.
Likewise.
And I really appreciate you being on today. And let's go get everybody to give 1%.
That sounds like a great idea. Thank you so much, Stu. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks, Kate. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, there you have it. Another great episode of Relish This. Thanks for listening. If you would like to learn more about how to apply the audience engagement cycle to expand your organization's mission, there are two things you can do. Right now, you can go to missionuncomfortablebook.com to download a copy of my book. And while you're there, you can get your purpose-driven marketing score to see where you can unearth some gold for your organization. If you'd like to listen to back episodes of the show or sign up to be a guest, go to relishstudio.com/podcast. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week for another great episode of Relish This.